I'm going to talk about a multi-level model of the hippocampal formation from behavior to neurons. This work was done at Cambridge in collaboration with Brad Love at UCL. So we have these cognitive models based on cognitive theories, which are able to capture behavioral performance of concept learning and categorization tasks very well. But they're typically quite abstract. It's difficult to know how we can link these models to specific brain mechanisms. We can show correlations, such as those of internal model representations, with those of the brain, such as the hippocampus during learning. But how do we go beyond neural correlates? There's a large gap between cognitive models and neurons. So we have circuit level models and cognitive models, which typically explain different things, such as neural activity and behavior. And they're quite disconnected. A levels of mechanism approach aims to span across levels in a single account, where the higher level constructs can be decomposed into lower level mechanisms whilst retaining its cognitive properties. In this work, we decompose the cognitive model of concept learning into a population of neurons while still capturing concept learning behavior and neural data. So here are some behavioral data from Shepard's group in 1961. There's 6 category rules, and this is just showing that cognitive models like sustain, which is a clustering model, is able to capture human behavior. So this is the behavioral learning curves in humans, and this is the model output. This model can also show representations that track those in the hippocampus of the human brain during learning. More recently, I've shown that clustering models can produce concept-like representations, but also spatial neural representations when they're doing a spatial task. So in this toy example, we have 2 clusters for 2 categories, and on each trial, the model sees some stimulus, and the closest cluster will move slightly towards that stimulus. Over time, the clusters will learn their positions and then find the central tendency of each of the categories. For the spatial case, you might have a circular arena and a set number of clusters, and the agent or rodent may move around the arena like this. And it's the same learning rule that each cluster will move slightly towards the agent over learning, and the clusters over time will spread out, and you can see something like place and grid cell-like representations found in the hippocampal formation. So we have these cognitive models now with some abstract constructs like clusters. But how can we decompose them into something like a lower level mechanism like neural populations? So Craver has talked about multi-level mechanistic explanations. And for us, those would be something like a behavior at the top level. And the lower mechanistic level is the cognitive model. We have multiple clusters that can lead to a decision rule for categorization. But we can also decompose particular parts of this at this level, like a particular cluster, how that arises as well. So how do we do this? So we built a multi-neuron clustering model. We start now with thousands of neurons, and we have K winner takes all rather than a single cluster takes all. And we learn over time based on similar principles to sustain. When you trial, the model gets an input, you weight the different features with the attention, and then you have multiple units that respond to the stimulus and make a category decision. So now that we have so many neurons, one question is, how can we coordinate the neuron's activity? So we look to nature to find inspiration. So birds show flocking, which is coordinated behavior. And we know that this kind of coordinated behavior is based on simple local rules. So for example, if we just follow the direction of the birds that are around you, you can get coordinated behavior. So in this simulation, you can see that there's different flocks of birds. And for example, this one is trying to find a flock because it's trying to find the average direction of its peers, and now it finally finds one. And we thought that we could think about this mechanism in the brain as well. So instead of just having this simple clustering update rule, which is on the first trial, you have a stimulus and K winners move towards the stimulus. We have an extra recurrent step. So this is where the K winners will move towards each other. And you can see that with this recurrence, over time, the K winners will kind of stick very closely to each other and form something like a set of concept cells or place cells, and with very selective tuning. So here are the Shepherd's 6 category types. And the idea here is that it goes from difficulty level from type 1 to type 6. For example, type 1, you have 2 categories, and you can judge just based on the darkness of the color. So this is category A and this is category B. Whereas in type 6, it's much harder. You have to memorize the items to categorize them. You can see that there's human behavior, and this is the model output, which captures the difficulty ordering. In the spatial case, now we can start with thousands of neurons. And because we have this recurrent step, they can form these virtual clusters or place cell assemblies where many cells, hundreds or thousands of cells can represent a particular part of space. And we can show these spatial neural representations. Finally, we can also, now we have a population of neurons, we can further decompose the model into two separate modules. So we have 2 brain areas that have different functional properties. We know that the anterior hippocampus and the posterior hippocampus have different tuning properties, such as wide fields versus small fields. And so this interestingly relates to attention in the category cognitive model as well. And so some types like type 1, which requires attention, benefits from this wide tuning, whereas type 6 and these rule plus exception types have a benefit from a narrow tuning. So you can see that we can also simulate this in 2 banks of neurons, which causes some output. And this matches human fMRI data with anterior versus posterior hippocampus. So in summary, the original cognitive model has abstract clusters to group stimuli for learning concepts, correlates with hippocampal activity, and can produce spatial neural representations. Here, we decompose the cognitive model's constructs into a lower level mechanism, and we span across levels. Inspired by flocking, we suggest that the hippocampus could do a similar thing with recurrence, which naturally leads to virtual clusters, concept cells, and place cells. We link across mechanistic levels for a fuller explanation, from behavior and clusters to a population of neurons, capturing behavior and aspects of hippocampal neural data. Thank you for your attention.